I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. My father was a druggist, and he had his own drugstore in Columbia, and then he lost it during. I was born in 1926. That was just the beginning, right before the Big Depression. Anyway, he had too many. I guess he took too many chickens instead of money or whatever.
Oh.
But anyway, we moved from. I was there just 2 years, and we moved to Raleigh. We worked for Eckerd's. It was a different Eckerd's than the one in Florida, and then he moved. We were there just 1 year, and moved over to Charlotte, and were there 5 years. Well, I guess maybe 6, and we moved to Sanford because my mother had 3 brothers there, and I moved there in 1935. I was 9 years old. So I grew up in Sanford as far as schooling from 9, most of the schooling from 9 until 18. Then I went in the Navy, World War II. But Sanford was the celery capital of the world when I was there.
Was it really?
Yeah,
I did not
it has
know
quite,
that.
yeah,
I know I've
yeah,
seen a few labels from Sanford with celery on it, but
yeah.
it was like I didn't realize Hastings was the big potato place that it was.
Well, all 3 of them were three of our brothers were in the agricultural business. So one of them was a celery farmer, one was a shipper. He shipped celery not only out of Sanford, but out of Savannah, New York, and Zellwood, and then later Belgrade. But anyway, and when I got out of the Navy, and I decided I wanted to go into agriculture, he said, if you want, my uncle was the older one, that was a shipper, who was head of the Florida National, he was a general, head of the Florida National Guard, Joseph C. Hutchison. Anyway, he had his own business, and he said, if you want to farm, I'll help you. If you want to go and come back and join business with me, because he had 2 daughters, didn't have any sons. And I thought I fit the marketing in better than the growing.
Right.
I always felt like growers needed to be able to fix a tractor. It broke down, which I'm not good at that. So I went off to Florida and studied agricultural economics. But while I was there, he was away during the war. He headed up the Dixie Division in the Philippines, my uncle, as a general there. But anyway, someone else ran the business, and he did a good job. But he didn't quite keep up with the duties and the chases and some of the other bigger, how that happens.
Right.
So my junior year at Florida, he said, you can still come back and work with me, but the future may not be quite. He could see the handwriting on the wall. Also, by that time, the celery industry, somewhat like citrus, had moved further south.
Okay.
To the mucklands because they could grow it cheaper.
Is that when Duda got involved with that type of stuff?
Well, Duda was in Oviedo. They were big celery growers.
Right.
And then they later went into citrus, and then I'm sure they moved down to the Belgrade as well. I'm not sure whether, but anyway, the industry, the celery industry, moved more south because they could grow. So it's kind of like citrus. And because they could grow it cheaper on the mucklands around Belgrade,
right,
than they could in Sanford. But I just anyway. So he said to me my junior year, if you want to, consider maybe looking into some other type of agriculture, he said, I'll understand. So that was when citrus. I went to Florida in got out at 46, went in 44 the Navy. And that's just when this industry was beginning to really, as he says so well in the book, because of orange concentrate. So I started studying some citrus, took citrus courses. Ziegler, do you remember that name?
I do remember. He's in the Hall of Fame, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. He had been a caretaker, but then he went up and taught. And he taught, I had a citrus course with him.
Where was he a caretaker, do you remember?
He worked for, I'm not sure which of it was a fresh fruit house. I'm not sure which one, but I said caretaker. He was in production for them. Maybe he was a manager. I don't know. But anyway, he taught citrus, and then So I stayed, and then and started studying citrus, and then the Florida Citrus Exchange had a scholarship, marketing scholarship, cooperative marketing. And I was able to get that and stay on one more year and get a master's. So I have some connection with the Florida Citrus Exchange, as did one of our early founders, Elsie. So I have deep roots in agriculture and celery and in citrus. But
Well, after you
I love the
graduated from,
citrus industry. It was such an exciting time. Oh,
you were
God.
in it absolutely at the right time.
Oh, the right time, from the 50s to the
But how did you
to
get
the
from, when you graduated from University of Florida, who did you go to work for first?
Well, I worked 1 year with my uncle,
Okay.
and he said, if you want to look for a job in citrus, take all the time you need. So I drove all, I interviewed with a lot of people, had two, and one of them was like Spasco, Tom Quimby, or whether you ever remember his name or
I don't
not.
remember that
I don't
name.
his name. But he was the sales manager, so I called on him, and I'll never forget, he's like a little Bantam rooster, had his feet up on the deck. Anyway, he was the sales manager, and he said, I like your resume, I like you. He said, but we just don't have any openings now, just keep us in mind. So I had two offers. I had an offer from, and I can't remember the name of the fresh fruit house. It was down somewhere near Wauchula. I've forgotten. If I heard it, I might remember it. But anyway, I got a job with the Florida Citrus Exchange. So I actually worked with them.
What were you doing with them?
I was a sales trainee in Tampa.
In Tampa.
And I'd been there 6 weeks, and I get a call from Bill Edwards, who was then the
I love that guy.
executive vice president at Pasco. He said, we've had 5 of our salespeople leave. They want to set up their own business. They went over to Groveland and tried to set up their own business over there. He said, we're looking for some salespeople. I've already hired a sales manager, and we've got, at that time they had a direct sales force, but prior to that they had been selling through at field offices and had even merchandisers. So they took some people in from the field office.
Okay.
And the reason he called, he said, Les Collier. Do you remember that name?
I remember Les Collier.
Les Collier was
Out of Winter Haven?
Yes. Yeah. I think he was, at that time, it was Lake Hamilton that he was the sales manager for. And the thesis I did when I got a master's was on a sales analysis of Lake Hamilton.
Oh my gosh.
And I got to know Les Collier. And he said, Les Collier has recommended you, so that showed you how sometimes it pays to go to the University of Florida. The connections make a big difference. So I figured there was a better future in the concentrate than it was in the fresh. I'm not sure that was long-term true, but at the time I certainly thought so. So I left after 6 weeks with the exchange and came back and worked as a sales. They had already filled the 5 slots, including, but the man they hired as a sales manager, Angela Watson, whether you've ever heard his name or not.
The name's familiar to me, but I'm not placing where.
They hired him. He was part of the family. There was a lot of family involved there with the Edwards. But anyway, he said, he told Bill Edwards, I want you to interview Pete, and just because. Anyway, so I went to his house. He was living in Tampa. I never forget that. And he was from South Carolina. And we just hit it off. Anyway, he ended up hiring me as a sales trainee. And I was a guinea pig on the first testing. He had worked for United Airlines and had been a pilot in World War II. And he had been through all these testing. So he said, I want you to be the guinea pig. I'm going to give aptitude tests. So
How old were you then? How old were you then?
I was, 18 when I went to, I graduated in college, high school at 18, went to 20, I'd be 24, 25, about that age.
And they hadn't really done a lot of that type of aptitude testing at the time.
And they had never done it at Pasco. So I was a guinea pig. So I took the test, and anyway, they hired me as a sales trainee, and I had first gave me 2 states. Well, I don't know whether you're interested in all this.
No, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, we can edit
Yeah.
down whatever we need to.
Yeah,
so.
but anyway, it was.
Did you
I
have to go to the different states then and do?
So I started off with 2 states, Illinois and Wisconsin, and then later they added some states. I got some additional states, and then I was a divisional manager first, and then a regional manager, and then they reorganized the sales staff and had what they call a group that just sold retail. At the time I went there, we sold everything: canned, food service, retail, everything. But they kind of specialized and set up a group to sell frozen concentrate, private label entirely, and put me in charge of that. And I had 5 people. Maybe one of the best things I did was people I hired. One thing Ansley told me when he hired me, he said, when you hire people smarter than you are, which I think is pretty good advice. So some of the people that I hired did do very well in the company later on. But anyway.
Who were some of the people?
Well, Jerry Rice.
Oh, he was one of your hires?
I hired Jerry Rice, yeah.
Yep.
Fred Godfrey. Let's see, Bob Cooper. He ended up heading up our Vitality, which was one of our.
Oh, right, yeah.
We kind of revolutionized that part of the food service business, but.
How did you revolutionize it?
With dispensers, I think we were the first. Many sometimes think they were, but I think we were the first to develop a dispenser program and to serve single service use. And then we hired someone from Minute Maid. So I guess they had some experience with dispensers, and we built our own dispensers over in Clearwater, and then later built in Zephyr Hills place to make our own dispensers. But we were certainly the pioneer in that field, and it was a big part of our, particularly from a profit standpoint, a big part of our business. But
I remember being at the food shows and with Vitality, and then the booth doing the trade shows and things.
Yeah, the Vitality became a very strong food service brand, and we had great distributors. What's the big food service company now that there was Sam the Ball? Was that his name, Sam Ball from Dallas? And I can't remember who they were, but there were 3 distributors that we had been selling to, who formed this food service company that's now one of the biggest. I'll think of the name of it in a minute.
I've been out of that side for so long, I wouldn't remember.
Sometimes.
I mean, I know that Florida's Natural, they kept their food service up for a while, but that was Bluebird, right? Bluebird, Southern Fruit, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Southern Fruit had the Bluebird label.
Yeah.
Caruso.
Caruso,
right.
yes.
Yeah. What's happened to him? Is he still alive?
No, he passed away,
He did.
unfortunately, a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Gosh, so many people that I knew. I never thought I'd live to be 99 years old. I turned 99 on April 30th. I still can't believe it.
Well, happy birthday. I can't wait.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we'll see on the Today Show when you turn 100.
Yeah, I was actually in the hospital. Well, I was out of the hospital. I had never had any surgery, but I had to have surgery and done in March 29th, and then I was in a skilled nursing when my birthday came. So we celebrated there, but then later celebrated it afterwards. But,
I saw the picture on Facebook.
Oh, you did? Huh?
I did. I think David Sumner posted it at some point.
Yeah.
Because he really enjoyed the interview he had with you.
Yeah, of course, I didn't know him, but I knew the Sumners. Bob Sumner was a prominent lawyer here, and the Sumner family was very. But I really met him when he called me, and I didn't realize I guess it was his grandfather that had citrus and River Road here in Dade City.
Was either his
about
grandfather or his
150
great
acres.
grandfather? Was
It
one of
may
the,
have been the great.
it was one of the two. I'm not.
Yeah, I can't remember either, but he's very interesting. And I think his book is very good. He did a great job. I noticed he got a lot of help from you and from others.
I helped him out, just hooking him up with people that I knew.
Well, that was
he needed to
important
talk
because
to,
he talked to
yeah,
so many people.
I helped
there.
set up a lot of those interviews. For him.
Yeah.
And he did a great job. I agree.
He did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a journalism. I guess he had a PhD in that. And he taught at Ball State. Well,
Yes.
you know his background.
Yes.
But no, I had never met him, but I enjoyed talking with him in his book. I haven't finished reading it, but he's a good writer. It reads very well, and it's certainly a great history of the.
I thought he did. I mean, I haven't finished it myself, but what I've read, he's done a nice job, and I know everybody I've talked to has really enjoyed it.
Did a good job, and I heard about the meeting at Bonita Springs.
Yes, he was there.
Citrus
I think his
Mutual,
birthday was yesterday or today. I know. I wish him happy birthday.
He said he got a standing ovation.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was very happy about that.
I was a citrus grower as well. I was in a Grove Corporation and then owned a grove.
What was the name of that one?
Well,
both of them.
Well, the citrus organization was we call it JJ Grows. When I moved to Dade City, and there a lot of the people there own groves, the Edwards and everybody, but I tell you, trying to buy an orange grove here in 1952 was like trying to buy an oil well. I tell you, I'm telling you, you could not. There'd been so much money made on citrus. From about 1947 to about 1950s, they said at one time we had more millionaires per capita in Dade City than. I mean, there was a lot of money made in citrus with Hamlin's on rough lemon, with great. But anyway, I lost my train of thought there. We were talking about.
We were talking about the groves, and you had bought the grove here.
The groves here. Well, anyway, I decided when I moved here, I decided I wanted to get into in the grove business I'd had a college friend whose brother was here, George James. And his brother was I knew at Florida, and we became good friends. And he was a grower and a caretaker, and we started looking for a grove. And I tell you, you just couldn't find. Nobody wanted to sell groves, but finally his uncle, who was named Jesse James Groves, or JJ.
That's where the JJ Groves came
from? That's where the JJ. So George and I and his father-in-law, who was at the bank here at Bank of Pasco, formed a 40-acre grove and bought it in '59, and here comes the '62 freeze.
Oh, no.
My timing on buying owning groves was not the best. '62 freeze came along, but we didn't have to replant much, but we did recover the grove, and it later helped put one of my children through college, and it helped. The Grove Corporation bought a house in Highlands.
Okay, up North Carolina.
Yeah, which is one of my favorite places. If you've ever been to Highlands,
I have. Yes.
It's a wonderful place, but my wife would have moved there. It's like an air-conditioned city. But anyway, we bought a house there, so that one did well. But then later on, it was about, I guess, just before the '80s, I bought my own grove from Van Pittman, who was related to had married one of the Masses. The Masses were a prominent family. Yeah.
I know Scott Massey and Diane and that group.
Yeah, so I bought a 40-acre grove, and that
was right before the '80s?
And then here come the '62 freeze.
Yeah.
Well, the '62 freeze, yes, was after that grove, the grove that the corporation bought. The one I bought from Van Pittman was just before the '80s. It was in the '70s, so of course the '80s was.
'77 is when it snowed here.
Oh.
So yes.
The '80s, I never dreamed a 25-year-old tree would be killed. You know, the freezes in that decade, and we ended up having to the corporation to sell the house in North Carolina, but one of our banking friend built another one, so I've been going to Highlands, except for last year, every year for our family is going back into the 80s. But
and I'm supposed to go up and see
so anyway,
fish up there.
so I had grows, and then I worked for Lights, and I don't know whether you want to go any further with my career or not, but if you do.
Well, I'd like to hear more about Lights. I don't have a lot of information on the processing industry at all and how it developed. I mean, when concentrate came in, it was such a huge shift. I mean, we were all fresh, and then we go to all processing, not 90% processed. So tell us a little bit about how that developed and how you were involved in a lot of that, because you went into public relations and marketing at that after a while, right? Or
in the latter stages, yeah, I was. Well, it was Pasco Packing Association. It was started in 1936. It was a fresh fruit house. L.C. Edwards Sr. who was the one-time president, you probably know because he was in the Citrus Hall of Fame, one-time president of the Florida Citrus Exchange. But he had grows. He was the patriarch, I guess, of the family. He'd had grows, and then his son Mark Edwards, L.C. Edwards Jr., and then later Bill Edwards. And then there was a grower named L.C. Halls who actually lived with the Edwards. His father had died during the flu epidemic, and he moved in with the Edwards family here in Dade City, and he had a pretty good sized acreage, and Herbert Massey had come down and had a tobacco business, and that didn't work very well here, so he had groves. So it was L.C. Edwards Sr., L.C. Edwards Jr., we call Mark, and then L.C. Halls, who was a grower, and then Herbert Massey, who was a grower, and then Frank Price. In fact, that's the only thing I noticed in the book. I'm surprised Steve. I see where Steve Futch. I knew the Futches well too, but I see where he kind of edited it. But he left out one of the founders. Actually, it was Frank Price, who was had the bank here, the Bank of Pasco, so he was part of the money part of it.
And he left the money part out?
Yeah,
it's not normally a good
well, the
thing.
others had money too, but he was an important member.
Right.
It was L.C. Edwards Sr., L.C. Edwards Jr., and then there was Massey and Halls and Price. Okay. 5 of them. Built a fresh fruit house where the plant was out there, and they were shipping fresh fruit. And it started in 1936, and then concentrate. And they were a pretty sizable shipper. I think they shipped like 250,000 boxes the first year.
Wow.
Because there was quite a bit of, Pasco at that time had quite a bit of citrus. In fact, I don't know whether you ever heard of Glenn Davies. He was. Oh,
the nursery?
Well, no, Glenn Davies was from South Africa. He was, he was a good friend of the Edwards, and he came over and joined them. He was the one who really brought the essential oil and all of the byproducts that started that at Pasco, but he always.
I've not heard that name before, and if he started this oils, I'm surprised we don't have any more information on him.
Glenn Davies. Well, he was.
I'm thinking Glenn Mary. That's what I'm
quite interesting. But he always said that Pasco County was the best place in the world to grow citrus, except for 2 nights a week, 2 nights a year when we had freezes, but. I mean, the rolling hills here in the soil, and all, so there was a lot of citrus. At one time, we had 20,000 acres of citrus. You probably.
So what year was this? What years were this? Where they actually shipped that much fruit?
1936, the first year. I think they shipped. By the way, I've got something I can give you.
Okay.
It's a history of it.
I'd love to have that. Yeah. Absolutely.
In fact, well, we'll go ahead and talk about it, and then I'll give it to you. But. So they became a very successful fresh fruit house, and then it was said that L.C. Edwards Sr. was sort of a visionary. He said if he found a way to do something that was better than what they were doing, he was quick to change. I mean, he kind of challenged the future. That's one way they put it when we did our anniversary. But they started packing. Some of the fruit was not suitable for fresh. Started packing canned juices. So we were one of the early packers of canned. And then World War II broke out, and we were the pioneers in packing what they call hot pack concentrate.
Right.
Shipped during World War II. In fact, we won an award you probably saw for that. I guess what they call it, A award for during World War II. And so we moved from we were still shipping fresh. That was our main. And then they started shipping. Went into the canning business, and they had a milk bottling was the first way how they started closing. But anyway, and then concentrate comes along, of course, and a lot happened in the 50s. Well, in the 40s, but just prior to the 50s. In the 40s, not really so much. A lot happened in the 50s too, but in the 40s, of course, concentrate was developed in 45. West Coast growers, they came up with the idea of having a group of grower association to assure supplies of fruit. And we were one of the early, I guess, companies to do that.
Was that called Pasco Citrus Growers?
It's called West Coast Growers.
West Coast Growers.
West Coast Growers.
Okay.
So during the 40s, there was concentrate was developed. West Coast Growers was formed. Emmett Evans joined Pasco during that time.
And where did he come from?
He came from Auburndale. He had been in the automobile business, but he'd had citrus too, and he had kind of a Midas touch. Whatever he went to, he did very well. Finance. At one time, he was one of the largest growers in the state, and I guess they're still based in Vero. I'm sure you know the.
Well, I know Emmett Evans'
the son.
The son.
Yeah, I knew.
And I know Ron Edwards. And,
right.
And Ron.
The one that's running it now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, Emmett Evans Sr. was one of. They claim he was one of the 400. Fortune magazine had him as one of the 400 wealthiest people in the country at one time. He had a lot of. He was one of the largest citrus growers, and anyway, he came in and joined them, and they had then Bill Edwards and Mark went in with him. They called Triple E. The three of them had some grows. So that period of the 40s when Pasco really grew, and one of the pioneers in orange concentrate. And that was developed by the University of Florida, but an experimental station. But from a production standpoint, we were one of the earliest. Now, Minute Maid was fairly early into it too as well. But we
were they called Snow Crop first? Was that Snow Crop first?
Snow Crop was a brand. And Minute Maid and Snow Crop were. At one time they were separate, but then they later. I think they bought the Snow Crop brand. Yes. I think that's what happened. But anyway, so a lot happened. Emmett Evans came in. West Coast Growers. Concentrate was developed. And the Evans they came in. Probably something else I can't remember. But it was. And at one time we had. I think I mentioned this earlier. We had direct to sell the concentrate canned juices. And this is kind of interesting. One time we tried to corner we thought tangerine juice was going to be a great idea. Oh. So we tried to corner the tangerine market. And they claimed they had trucks lined up almost from the plant all the way downtown. people could bring it in tax free, and that obviously did
not work.
did not work. So they were kind of the Edwards were kind of known not only as they said Mark Jr. was kind of a genius, but anyway they were known somewhat as gamblers or people who would try things early.
Right. What were some of the labels that they had?
So they started off with 3 house brands.
Okay.
They had Old South, Pasco, and Florida Gold.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah. This was a good article that was written by Carol Jeffries for the Tribune about citrus returns to long-time plant. This is when they ended up, and it, shut down from the beginning till the time they actually closed in 1999, which I can give to you and you can send back to me if you want to, or make copies of it or something.
I might be able to even scan it while we're here.
Yeah.
Take a look at that.
But I'll go ahead and talk about it if you want me to a little bit about it.
I would love that because I don't have anything on Likes Pasco at all, and it was such a huge impact to the industry that we need to have something on record about it.
Yeah, right.
And I think the only time I was actually ever there was when Jim Goodry had the Citrus Museum in there.
Oh yeah, he had the museum. It was kind of interesting.
I thought he did a nice job on that.
Yeah,
but I don't know whatever happened to it.
There was. I wonder what happened to that film they had.
Because that was a good film.
Yeah, that was interesting.
When he closed,
he did a good job. The Pioneer Florida Museum also had had quite a bit on the history of of Pasco, and I don't know whether they still have that. When he spoke out there, my wife was very active in it when she was president out there for 6 years, and I spent many a Labor Day working for the Pioneer Florida, but. They had quite an exhibit of the history of Pasco, but I don't know whether they still do or not. But
I've not been in there, and I didn't. I haven't really done a lot, and I haven't been able to find where Jim has gone to, or whatever happened to that museum that he put together. And
I don't know either.
Like you said, the film and everything else, because I'd love to be able to track it down and at least be able to save it somewhere.
Yeah, it's a good question because I've had that same question in my mind because. Having been out of it a long time now, I hadn't really, didn't necessarily think it was a priority to get back in to find out about it. But I'd be interested too if you find.
I'll let you know what I find out.
But I've got a couple of things that I could give you that you could refer to. But I'll go ahead and finish telling a little bit of the story. But,
okay.
But they started. There's one thing that she talks about in there how I think Halls came up with how much money in the beginning, $15,000.
Can you imagine starting that today?
Yeah, he said Halls.
What year did they start?
1936.
With 15,000, that's amazing.
Yeah, he said Halls took a loan from the Bank of Pasco for $15,000, and L.C. Edwards Jr., known as Mark, contributed $5,000 for the total capital investment in Pasco Packing Association. Can you imagine that?
$20,000. That's crazy.
$20,000. Golly, bum.
And what did they end up with at the very, at their height?
I'm not
they were
sure.
They were one of the largest.
It
says world's largest citrus processing plant.
Yes, it was. No, it was the world's largest citrus processing plant when I came in 1952. And
that's when you started, was 52?
Yeah, I came in 52, and the sales force at one time was in the field. I think I mentioned that.
Right.
And they had merchant, and after Concentrate was developed, we not only had sales offices, but we had merchandisers in the field who would go in and talk to the retailers about this Cinderella product, and you need to have, make sure you have frozen food cases. It was kind of, because the frozen food industry was kind of getting started about that time too. And,
right.
And so that but about the late, before I came in 52, I would say it was maybe 50 or 49. They decided to move to a direct sales force and brought all the salespeople to Dade City.
Okay.
From the division offices. It was quite a shock for little Dade City because some of these salespeople were rather.
That was during the time of the madman. Right?
Let's put it this way. They'd say it's a small town, not quite used to some of the. But anyway, they decided, they brought these people in and set up a direct sales force, and then they also continued, I think, in one market with we sold through brokers for a while too. Continued with our broker, I think, in New York, and I know we did it in Canada. We kept that broker because the Old South brand was very strong in Canada, and later but we'll talk about that later. But anyway, when I came, they hadn't had a direct sales force that long, but maybe several years, maybe longer. I don't know, but very many years. And it was kind of at the time when flying became popular, where you could fly out to the markets, when the commercial airline business was just getting underway. It was after,
that was when it was fun to fly.
Yeah, when it was really fun to fly.
It was.
And it was really, because they competed on how well their meals were. I tell you, it was really great service. And also they were building a lot of motels then. So it made sense, they felt, to bring them here. And so they go out. So when I joined them in 52, we go out 2 weeks at a time. Later we cut it to 1 week, and it was primarily in the fall of the year when we would, because the private label that we were by far the biggest private label packer. And as you probably know, Orange Concentrate had a larger share. Private label had a larger share than the brands.
Who were some of the major?
That was just the opposite of Chill.
Who were some of the major private labels at that time? It was like
Winter Garden was one of our major competitors, and then it was called Florida Citrus Canners, or later, I guess it was still called Florida Citrus Donald Duck brand.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of for the private label packing, who were some of the grocery names? Was it like Kroger, that kind of thing? Who were those people at that time?
Well, A&P had 20% of the market. Can you believe it? They had 20% of the national grocery market. And we were the largest packer for them. In fact, we had almost too much business. And so we wanted to begin to diversify, because we had too many eggs in one basket somewhat, because we were by far the major packer for A&P. But there was A&P and Kroger, and Publix had just started. And boy, if that isn't
that's an amazing story right there. Yes,
amazing story of what's happened to Publix. But there were chains. It was A&P. It was Safeway.
Oh, right.
And it was Kroger.
Was Piggly Wiggly around there?
And there were Piggly Wigglies. There were Independence people.
Mm-hmm.
Jewel in Chicago. The chains they were chains, but then there were cooperatives too, and independents and all. But Orange Concentrate was definitely a Cinderella product, and it really was sort of I think a driving force in the development of the frozen food business, really, about that time. But we'd go out to pack private label. We had to get we did. The A&P signed a contract with us, or Kroger, and then we'd go out in the fall of the year and get them committed for sign a contract for their product for the year, and it was really an exciting time because this was a kind of a new product, and it's funny, I particularly enjoyed it because when I did this testing I mentioned about Ansley, it indicated in some ways that I might be better maybe in some management than I would be in sales, for some reason. But we had this, as I said, they brought me as a sales trainer. I had 2 states, and we had a sales contest on grapefruit juice. And guess who won? I won. But I had maybe a little bit smaller base than some of the others. I don't know. But I had met my wife-to-be by that time here in Dade City. That's a picture of her over there, Mary Louise. In fact, she was Miss Pasco County. She was like you.
What year?
Yeah, like you. Well, we got married in 1954. I would say it was early 50s, but I don't know the exact year.
That's
There's also
great.
a picture of her out in the living room.
She's beautiful.
Yeah, but I had met her, and we decided to get married. Actually, I dated a couple of Bill Edwards' daughters first.
Oh.
But anyway, that didn't work out. But anyway, I met Mary Louise, and when I won this contest, the prize was a trip. I think it was to Cuba, but we later changed it to Nassau. So that was a pretty nice prize, and so we were going to get married that anyway. So we upped our date to August. That was 1954, and it paid for our honeymoon.
Oh, how fun.
We spent a week in
story.
Miami and a week in Nassau. We stayed in a hotel in Nassau that was built by the British. It was brand new. That was quite a... But anyway, my point is that I really enjoyed the time that I was there, the 4 or 6 years that I worked for them, and then I worked as a consultant for a while after I retired. But I think I enjoyed the 25 years of sales more than almost anything, because you built relationships with people, and you got to know them. I mean, and then in those days, you could entertain customers. And we would take them tarpon fishing to Boca Grande. Later on, we took them down to Nassau. They was at a house down, and you just built relationships with people that I just liked, enjoyed that type of selling. And one of the challenges that we had was that we had never sold Jewel, who was a big chain in Chicago, the leading chain in Chicago. And in fact, we didn't have as big a share of the market as Chicago that we did in some other places. And I was finally able to sell them, so that was one of my...
Your big trip.
Yeah, but as I say, we would go out 2 weeks at a time, get contracts, and come back. So it wasn't all that much traveling.
But now, when you were out...
you could take it on some of the trips. You could take your wife. I'd go to later on when I became sales manager of that small group of people, and then covered all of the whole country. We would go up to the New England Frozen Food Convention up in New England, stay in some of those old hotels, and I had a real good customer, a couple of them in New York. One of them was a Vitality distributor at that time. One was a big Global Frozen Foods, a big distributor. And we would go. They'd get tickets for plays, and we go. I mean, it was just. It was the heyday of sales of that type for me.
Absolutely. I remember some of the trade shows doing that too, with some of the Department of Citrus Field staff.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you.
Joe Marshman was with, I think, a field person at the time, and then later, of course, he was at Florida.
Florida's Natural.
Florida Natural. He was quite a guy.
I saw him not too long ago.
He and Bob, what was his name?
Turner. Bob Turner.
Bob Turner. Yeah, and then Buck Thompson was a big competitor. He worked for Winter Garden, but Buck Thompson and Bob Mayers. I don't know if you remember that name.
I don't know either one of those.
Yeah, but Winter Garden was, I would say, our major competitor. But Florida Citrus Canada was there too. But their Donald Luck brand was pretty well established.
Yes.
But we had the three brands. We had, as I said, Old South, Florida Gold, and Pasco, house brands. But our primary business was private label.
Now, when you went out on your sales trips, did you guys do some of the merchandising in the stores and everything too, like the Department of Citrus Field staff did? 'Cause I know I see a lot of early pictures of that, and I wondered how it came about.
We didn't. No, we didn't. Now we may have gone in occasionally to a store just to see how they were displaying the product or something, but we didn't do a lot of that. Now, when I was brand manager when we and this goes later. It's later in the story. We tried to. First of all, we were late getting in to the chill business, which is one of our mistakes our company made. But Mark Edwards always said, "They're not going. That product isn't going to work. You haven't shipped all that water." So to concentrate. He forgot about the laziness. He forgot about the convenience of the consumer.
Right.
But we were late getting into that too. But when I was a brand manager for Old South, we tried to. This was in the late. This was way up into the 70s or 80s. We tried to. When we made some other major changes. It's when I moved from sales and into the marketing part of it. We tried to establish Old South as a brand in Canada, and Florida Gold as a brand in the U.S. And I was a brand product manager for Old South in Canada, and that was one of the most fun times I had too, along with the sales part. But then I would go, I'd go into stores and we would check, how they would displaying the product.
Right.
But I don't know whether that answered your question.
Well, I know that they used to have contests and display contests among the stores and that type of thing.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys did that too or not.
I think that was probably most of the field staff.
Yeah.
They had a very good staff from Florida Citrus Commission.
Yes.
Yeah. John Marshman, I know, and I don't know whether Bob Turner was ever did that or not. He may have also did that.
Bob was there when that was going on.
Yes.
Yeah,
there were quite a few people that came back into the industry and worked, who had been field people for the commission. But I was in sales for 25 years, and from 1952 until what was in there? Was 50? Was it 25?
77.
77. And
when it snowed.
I would say that was my most enjoyable years there. But then we had a kind of a major organizational change then, and a battle. I don't know whether you want to publish any of this, but it's really what really I think caused the demise of Pasco more than even being too far south and other freezes and other things. There was a battle going on in the Likes. Likes bought, I don't think I did mention in the 40s, the other thing that happened was that Likes bought 20% interest, Likes Brothers. And they were one of the biggest agricultural. They'd gone into citrus because of Bob Wooten, who had been a big citrus and was married to one of the Likes. But they were big citrus growers. But they joined. They bought 20% interest in the 40s too, and then in 1954 they bought controlling interest. And as long as Joe Like Sr., who was the patriarch of the whole of the thing, as long as he was there, he let Bill Edwards and Mark Edwards and Ansley and King and others run the business. And Chester Ferguson came along after he died, and he did the same thing. But then things started changing. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether you know Tom Rankin.
I remember the name.
Yeah. Well, Tom Rankin, the Rankin family were in Cuba and big in the cattle business down there, and they lost that with revolution, and Castro came in. And he moved up, and he was a young, kind of a rising star I guess, in the Likes family, and then and Bob Wooten, who had originally talked Likes into going into citrus. The two of them became real close, and they, I guess to put it, well, I guess the only way to put it is they wanted to take, frankly, over the running of Likes Pasco.
Mm-hmm. This is in the 80s?
And this was in, I would say it was in the beginning of the 70s or 80s, about that time.
Because I remember hearing his name in the 80s, when I came on in the early 80s, and I remember, I knew he was in there at that time.
Yeah. It was in the 80s. And so one of the things that happened and he was going, frankly, I think his desire, Rankin, was to end up running Likes Pasco, and Bob Wooten was very close to him and was part of that same trio, duo at the time, I guess you call it. And one of the first things that happened was Ansley Watson, who was vice president of sales, who had hired me, who was my mentor, anyway, he and Rankin, Bob Wooten, were flying out to see Safeway. Ansley had his own airplane, the one that came, he had a Bonanza, and they were flying out. And none of us really know what fully happened, but I suspect what happened is that Ansley was the kind, I should a little more information about him. Not only did he come in when that 5 left back just before I joined the company, but he was the one who was really responsible for the dispenser, developing the dispenser business. He did a reorganization of the sales staff. And then King Kennedy was our sales manager. He was a very important part of it as well. But they were flying, Ansley was flying out with Bob Wooten to see Safeway. And we don't know what happened, but I think probably what happened is that they either talked about some changes or something, and probably Ansley was very strong-willed about things, and they probably saw him as someone that might be a problem if they were going to end up taking over the management of the company.
A wrench in the cog.
And so they retired him early.
Oh.
A nice retirement package. And then so, my mentor, who was really gone, which was kind of tough. I remember the time, and then they also later on moved Bill Edwards out, which was a sad thing. He moved him, and took over the management of the business, and made a lot of changes, and they did some reorganization, and that's when they moved me out of sales and moved me into marketing, into the brand, which I enjoyed, but I still would have liked it at the time, at least. Since I look back on it, it was fine, but worked out fine. But because I enjoyed what I did after that, but I did not hit. I remember talking to Rankin, he and I did not see things exactly on the same
page.
I mean, we just. I mean, he was. well, I don't know how much you're going to record of this, but I mean, I was I don't know. When I came, Ansley and I were, from a moral standpoint and other things, were on the same page. But some of the sales staff were pretty wild. Let's just put it. He changed. Ansley changed kind of the culture of that. It really did. And I was more, as I say, he was my mentor, and because I was somewhat different. I as you can imagine, my twin brother was a pastor. I mean, I had a strong faith. I didn't curse or tell dirty jokes or anything, and a lot of it wasn't me.
And then and then the Vitality crew was there.
Yeah,
and they were all the opposite.
yeah, they were, and then and also a lot of some of the sales. Although that changed a lot when Ansley came, because we hired a lot of new people and so forth. And for most of those 25 years he was there, and that was the time that But anyway, they moved me to. I think Rankin felt like that I was still associated with the old group.
Okay.
And was not, and so they reorganized the sales force, and then we decided, and they set up. My first title after that was Director of Marketing, which was kind of. We began to look into whether we wanted to turn two of our house brands into an advertised brand, both South and Pasco. And they made me the brand manager for Old South. And actually, I really enjoyed that. We had a great agency in Toronto, and we were the number two. Minute Maid was the number one, but we were a strong advertised brand in Canada,
right.
Much more successful. And then later there, I was brand manager of Florida Go. Now, Tom Rankin's whole type of leadership was more what's the right word?
Off the cuff?
Not off the cuff. Authoritarian is the right word I'm looking for. I mean, he just was a whole different style of leadership than we had from Ansley and Kell and King and Bill Edwards and the people that we had. And so anyway, they reorganized, and they put me. I was brand manager of that, and then later I was brand manager of Florida Go. But one of the things when we tried to establish these brands, we did quite well in Canada because the brand was already somewhat established, and we had an excellent agency. They had good advertising program, but in Florida Go, we started off in the Southeast, and Rankin wanted to be successful in every area before we moved to another one, profit. And of course, Chill. The other thing that Chill had started getting but to become a major factor, right. And Concentrate began to decline. And as I say, we were late getting into that, but we also started moving more in that direction too, to try to get Chill started. But here comes Florida Natural. It was, I don't think they were they first Florida Natural, or was their name before that? It was the name before that one. What was it? Anyway,
the one that they couldn't use.
They hired a person who had experience to come in, and they went national on their Chill product. They did it the right way, and because Chill was we began to really take off.
Right.
So our Florida Go, although it didn't do too bad in some of the southern markets, that was a tough road to hoe. But and then what happened? John Branscombe, who was another young person in the Likes family who had married to Likes, who was in North Carolina. He moved down to Likes, and he later headed People's Gas. You may have heard
People
her.
yes.
Yeah, John Branscombe.
Out of Lakeland, right?
He had desires of being involved in Likes as well. So there was a battle between the two of them, between Branscombe and Rankin.
Okay.
And then that was about the time that we started spending a lot of money on redoing our plant, updating it, and it was a time when we brought in a lot of consultants to tell us what we should do, and they did a whole revamp of everything, a reorganization.
Sounds expensive.
And we spent a lot of money on updating the plant and bringing these consultants in. And here, Branscombe was on one side trying to get control, Rankin was on the other. Well, eventually, Branscombe won out. That happened in the late 90s. And I think it's because we had spent all this money on the plant and some consultants and everything, and trying to get brands established. I just don't think we were making as much money as they would have liked. And he was kind of, came along at a time when it was ready to make, and so I guess the board went with him instead of. And then he came in, and that was in the late 90s. And then I think he came in with the purpose of really selling the business, and that's when they ended up. After about a year or two, they sold it to a company that Pippin became and for the first time ever, there was not either a Pasco or a Likes person that was running the company. Pippin became the president of Likes.
So how long did that last then? Because
well, I think he came in with the intent of selling it. Within about a year or two later, he sold it. And that's when they became Pasco Brands, the company. And then they went out of business in what? Now that's a lot of that's all in here if you want to read about it. Not some of the inside story, which you know probably about the battle of the two groups trying to but I even though I had a wonderful career at Likes, I was with the wrong horse in some ways. Being with I certainly was with when Rankin came there. They moved me from, and they were good. I mean, I enjoyed the marketing part of it because you worked with ad agencies and you developed programs, and I enjoyed that part of it. But I still liked the sales too. And then later they also moved me to the director of public relations and industry affairs.
What year was that?
And that was in the, oh gosh, let's see when that would have been. That was probably, it's all happened in the 80s, in the 90s. I would say it was a lot of part. I retired in 95. It was probably in the mid 80s or late 80s.
So when you were on the Citrus Commission, were you public relations?
I was never on the Citrus Commission. Now I was on Florida Citrus Mutual's board for 13 years.
Okay.
Which was kind of interesting because I was on there when Bobby McCowan was. You remember him?
Oh, I know. Yeah, we actually interviewed Bobby quite a while ago.
I'm sure you did. He's still doing all right, health standpoint.
I know. I think Bobby passed away last year.
I would begin to wonder whether he was still alive.
Yeah.
But I had these grows, and you have to get elected to the mutual board, and I was elected, served 13 years, and Jerry Rice was who I'd hired was one of the persons, and he I'll say this, he of the testing we did, there was no one that did better than on testing. He was very bright, he really was, and he actually, as part of this reorganization later, actually became the president for a short time. And
was he on the commission then? I know that.
And he was on the commission.
He was on the commission.
He was on the commission later.
Yeah.
But I'd hired him, and he and I were very close, and he wanted me to serve on public relations. We really didn't have what they call the public relations until then, but we decided that it was called public relations, but it was community and industry relations more than it was really in what I'd say just overall public relations. I became very involved in the city with the community, which Lights had never done. I was on the original board of the Main Street program, was the second president of that, and was very active in that. And then I would attend all the Citrus Commission meetings representing the company. And then it was kind of a plus that I was a part of the mutual board, because Mutual and Pasco at one time were not very, in the early days with the Edwards, they would have a kind of a battle with Mutual. They didn't agree with something.
Was Bobby there then, or was that?
That was before Bobby.
Was that Bob Rutledge?
Rutledge.
Yeah, had to be Rutledge.
Yeah, way back, maybe even before. When she did originally, Homer Hooks, I think, or somebody was the original. But anyway, I mean, it was over some. I've forgotten what the issues were, but anyway, I was kind of the fox in the hen house in some ways when I was on the mutual board, because here I was working for Lights Pasco, and Bobby felt very strongly that, although he and I were buddies, friends, but it was kind of interesting, because I was always sort of considered a little bit of the, I had a little bit of some Pasco carryover, I guess.
Well, I know a lot of the growers were not the it was always the growers against the processors.
It was always, that's right.
Yes.
So I was kind of on the processor side. So
you were infiltrating.
But I enjoyed my years on the board of Mutual.
Right.
I was on there for 13 years.
Now, when you were on the board there, what were some of the issues that you guys faced at that time that you remember?
I have to think. Let me take a rest stop.